Hi, and welcome to Finextra at Sibos TV. And today I'm talking to Orlando Hanselman of Fiserv. And we're going to be talking about possibly the biggest subject that everyone's talking about at Sibos, which is the potential impact of Basel III and in fact, any global regulation from Dodd-Frank in the U.S. So there seems to be a lot of hype about what these regulations are going to bring in terms of liquidity, expectations. So how does the hype differ from the reality of what's going to happen?
Well, the reality is very simple. To simplify what Basel III is all about, it's about more and better quality capital and liquidity. So there are going to be fundamental systemic changes to how banks manage their balance sheet and their whole banking business model. So that's the reality of it. The hype is that there's a lot of belief in the industry, I believe it's very false belief, that this too shall pass, that politics and lobbying will gut the intent of Basel III. And I'm absolutely convinced that that is not the case. While there will be some fine-tuning of the Basel III liquidity and capital accords, it will not be a substantive change from what is out there in regulation today. And the other thing that I believe the banking industry is missing is that early adaptation of Basel III will create a competitive advantage for them. And indeed, early adaptation will be cheaper than waiting until the last minute. So the hype is about this possibility of deferment or extinguishment, and that's an unrealistic hope.
So in your opinion, what should banks be doing, what should they practically be doing right now to prepare?
Well, I believe it begins with education. They need to be aware of what the issues are, what the regulations are. They need to understand how that is going to impact their strategic planning and their business model, and how to begin to prepare for that. The next thing I think that is necessary for every organization is to do what I call a gap analysis. They need to look at where they are today in terms of enterprise risk management and best practices and stress testing and capital optimization, and also where the regulations want them to be. Identify the gaps between those two positions and put together a meaningful tactical plan to get from where they are to where they need to be. And that plan will probably include things like ongoing education, particularly at the board of directors and executive level, some restructuring of reporting. There will also be new needs for analytical software and a software that brings all this together into an enterprise risk management framework and integrates the risk management. So we need to have that action plan put in place. In fact, having a credible action plan is job one. I think job two is to begin immediately to assess how they are standing up today with the new liquidity coverage ratio and gearing their balance sheet towards being able to produce reliable liquidity coverage ratio reports on a daily basis and seeing exactly where their shortfalls are today and building a strategy to bridge those shortfalls.
You mentioned about producing reports. I mean, are these daily reports, intraday reports? Are we looking at real-time reporting?
Well, it's kind of fascinating because Basel III, in terms of liquidity, has introduced several new ratios that are required. The liquidity coverage ratio, a 30-day short-term ratio, the net fund stability ratio, which is a longer-term one-year ratio, as well as several other ratios for concentration and so forth. They say that each of those ratios must be reported on a monthly basis. Substantively, it's monthly, but in reality, you have to be prepared to do it on a daily basis. So it's a significant recording element that is really far beyond most current financial institutions' capacity today.
So you mentioned earlier that there are a few banks that are having a wait-and-see attitude to what's going on. But are there any banks doing anything right today? Are we seeing any best practice emerging?
Yes, we are, very clearly. Best practices is clearly emerging with enterprise risk management and with the whole area of stress testing. Keep in mind that it's very clear to me and to the people that are at the forefront of adaptation that the only true measure of capital adequacy is stress-tested risk across the full probability spectrum. And I'm seeing increasingly more robust stress testing. I'm seeing an evolution to more sophisticated enterprise risk management. And I think there's a couple banks that have done notably well in the transparency of the reporting. They're talking more about how they manage these risks in their shareholder and public documents, and they're actually giving the public access to their sensitivities to risk and capital. They're doing that not because they're so wonderful, but they're doing that because they realize the public's belief in their credibility of safety and soundness is a strength and allows them to acquire both capital and liquidity at a cheaper price. So we're starting to see this happen, and the really smart adapters are doing it early now to create that kind of competitive advantage.
That's great. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Well, thank you for my
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.
Bye now.